very, very thankful to you for having invited me to your beautiful city. It's a city that takes me down my memory lane. I'll come to that a bit later because it also is the one that introduces me to you and me to my troubled world of education, the conflicting worlds that drew me to school and that drew me to the likes of you. So welcome all of you, what I consider to be a galaxy of intellectuals from all over the country. A hearty welcome from my side, a student that you raised, that you brought up, and that you see today standing before you years ago, maybe 35 years ago. So welcome, and indeed, I see all of you as partners in a very creative endeavor. What I talked to you today about is much less on the panditry that I may have gathered here and there, but a lot more on what I see of you as a galaxy of intellectuals, as a galaxy of those who can endeavor and make Indian education rise to what I see its real potential is. And as I was walking up your beautiful compound area, I could see, and I was talking to the Oxford University Press representatives, to whom I'm specially thankful for bringing me here to you, the Oxford University Press, Priyadarshini, who's been coordinating this from Calcutta, and all of you at the ASICS 58th ASICS conference, the conference of ISC and ICSC school principals. As I walked to your beautiful campus, I told Priyadarshini, I can see life here. It's a very vibrant campus. And how different this vibrance is. In a sense, it incorporates the life worlds that you exist in. It incorporates the lives that you lead, the professions that you engage in, and you bring with yourself to this huge hall here, to this beautiful, what's called the KIT Vishwavidyalaya Hall, a sense of vibrance that I have seldom ever seen, even if it were a galaxy of academic intellectuals who meet together, not to name and shame. But I was telling our very dear colleague Priyadarshini that it was just about 2 weeks ago that I was addressing a gathering of over 50 vice chancellors in Pune. Now, that should have been a similar and a very comparable occasion. But the vibrance that I see here at the word go, I am yet to interact with you, yet to meet you, yet to know you, but I know that this vibrance is indeed the right place where one should begin to deliberate upon and think upon the issues and challenges that are our own, that are something. It is in these challenges that the idea of India lives. It is in these challenges that our professions, in our school locations, in our college locations, in my research locations, I think everybody who puts pen to paper, that academic engagement, lives amidst these challenges. But it are these challenges that make India what they are. But before I come to the matter, so to say, I mean, I'm very glad that I was taught how to write that essay, where you did have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I will not bring you to the middle first, I'll bring you to the beginning first. And that's the story of my own personal journey into the world of education. A child who was brought up, who started her school in rural schools, did not know even a word of the standard Hindi vocabulary. I was brought up in what is now known as the vernacular culture around my lives and sounds, till the time I was brought up by my grandmother initially on her farms, till the time, and she thought that her daughter, who was a musician, a classical musician, my grandmother wanted her daughter to have a good career and felt that if she brought her daughter up, maybe her daughter could go and play music at the All India Radio where she was engaged and teach at the university and be a student at another university, the Banaras Hindu University. Teaching of music and learning of music was a very strenuous profession. But by the time I was teetering to age 7 or 8, my mother thought I should be brought into a good school, which is not where my grandmother lived. And that good school happened to be an ICSC school. My mother struggled to get me to an ICSC school. My father, however, belonged very much to the parts of India that we sit in today. He was one of those who was unabashedly a part of the regional socialist tradition. So this was my life world, driven apart really by a mother who thought that this little girl needs to get to a good school and an ICSE school at that. And my father, whose political mentors and close colleagues thought that it should be the local medium that should be strong with her, and that the English medium would take her away from us. And a great deal was struck by an eminent socialist leader, none other than Mr. Karpuri Thakur in Bihar in those days. He came around, and then he told my father, let her go to the school, but when she comes back, let her read all the literature that this land has ever produced. We were a family of small means, but in those small means, my father kept up to his promise. Once a year on a train, we would come by to Kolkata, and all the books that PPH ever published or that could be found on the streets of Kolkata were bought for me once a year to be read through the year. It was on one of those trips that I told him that why is it that our family never goes for a holiday? In my school, everybody goes for summer holidays and winter holidays. So my father said, a holiday? I said, yes. He said, okay. So the next, he went down to the station master and he looked at all the trains that were getting out of Calcutta and he brought me to Bhubaneswar and Puri. But before we boarded the train, he said, make me one promise. The books that I have bought you this time in Puri, you will not do all the things that tourists do. You'll sit by the seashore and you will read the novels I have bought you. Some of those novels in English and some of those novels in Hindi. I can't remember the year, but I was telling Priyadarshini that perhaps was 1978, 1979. But that was a troubled world that taught me to rise up and stand up. Once again, my father and his political mentors argued, this time in Delhi, saying that I must now graduate into the larger world of education that brought me to Lady Shri Ram College and took me thereafter to the London School of Economics and Political Science. But it was fortune that when I was graduating and when the doctorate was indeed awarded to me at the London School of Economics and Political Science, I was also on the same table, as is the tradition. The director of the committee rose up to say, you stay back with us. We've got a postdoctoral for you. And as you're aware, this takes you to a track tenure here. I said, no. He said, why? This is the LSE. I said, no. I'll go back to the land and its peoples, its questions, the issues that have allowed me to do my research. I will go back to them. My life is best spent in pursuit of those questions. And I think it is those questions, it is that quest that brings me back into that fold that has raised me and brought me where I stand today. So do consider it, I know you're a large audience, do consider it a dialogue on our part, do consider it a dialogue of minds. And as I open it up to your questions and your engagements in a little while from now, let me begin and take you on to vignettes of imagination as I have collected and gathered in the kind of research that I do. And I know that it is this audience more than any other that will patiently hang in there as I present to you some of the vignettes of thought that flow as research conclusions of the larger engagements I have, of the research projects that I do with minds that are abler than mine, but all of them collectively get together to deliberate on what should be rightly the preeminent question that India engages in, which I now understand is the education question. So, the third slide. Okay. Now, what are the, when Priyadarshini and I were initially conceptualizing, I was told education in a changing world. And I thought about it. I was told that this is a conference of school principals. But one of those things that I detest the most as I pursue a career in educational policy planning and do lots of policy work there, is that school is considered that box. As if the school principals cannot be imagining or cannot be deliberating on the larger educational question. Or that if you come from a school, you deal only with problems of the classroom site and instruction, as if the larger world of the school doesn't bother you. So I'm trying to go to locate myself in both of these pegs, one of which is the broader arena and terrain of schooling with which you should be rightly concerned. The second is the broader arena and terrain of where your school graduates go, the whole arena of tertiary education. So in a sense, the most important force that's reshaping the entire arena of education without distinguishing the school from the higher is what is called globalization. The global order is reshaping our lives in a sense in which we don't even understand it. I know within minutes of my meeting another person who's in this profession, somebody will come up and say, "Are you doing your lectures still in the chalk and talk method?" And I tell them it's a very effective method, yes. They say, "Aren't you doing MOOCs and Moodles?" I say, "Yes." "You studied abroad, don't you want to go for digitalization?" I know all of those words are meaningless unless the educational deliberation is brought back into the heart of those things. So globalization is not simply bringing about computerization and digitalization and CDs and PowerPoints. This is not a great way to talk to people. The only benefit being that to a large audience, had this been a smaller class, the chalk and talk method could still have been potentially very effective. Now the globalization and global order, the most critical change that it's doing to all of us is bringing about something called the knowledge society. Nation states in which we stand today, for example, even our own, our independence, came to us at the time of the World War II. Now those wars were fought over coal mines, over control over iron and steel, on the battles between Germany and France, over the battle between the Allies and the Axis powers. But look at where the new battles are being fought. The new battles are not as much being fought in the terror of the battlefields as much as it is being fought in the knowledge societies that one or other country can transform itself into. So in a sense, there is this implicit race. Now, there are old players, like the US does very well, but there are also new ones, and that's what surprises us. We tend to say, "Oh, England is better than us, oh, US is better than us." But what about a China that wasn't there? And in fact, in the book that I have published with the Oxford University Press, that tells us the story. In 1993, India and China borrowed for the first time from the World Bank for education purposes. Borrowing until then was limited to building roads, bridges, electricity. What happens? That two of the giants of the world borrow from the World Bank for education. Now, China used it for different purposes. China used it to reshape its tertiary education. India used it for what a lot of you may know, the district primary education program. That indeed was the beginning of my work and association in 1993 with the World Bank and with the government of India on reshaping education policy. But in the last 20 years, in the borrowings that we did in 1993, China and India adopted two different pathways. So we have different institutional players. The US that has its universities set up in the 1880s. England, older than that, the oldest hub of universities. Germany, an old player, but us, a new player. It surprises us, therefore, that we don't do as well as many of the new players do. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story of the Shanghai Jiaotong University, the SJT. Yes or no? Yes? No? Okay, so that's the university that adopted a planned approach, and within 10 years, and this was at the turn of the millennium, after 2000, it adopted two plans. One, to improve the quality of over 30 universities, and the second plan was to build one world-class university, and that's the Shanghai Jiaotong University. In 20 years flat, China gave us a world-class university through a process of strategic planning. Not only gave us a world-class university, it also built its own ranking mechanism. Now, the reason why I'm talking about these things is because these order of changes will soon begin to impact the way we do our school education as well. Now, it's also the time. Lots of changes in the world. Knowledge society comes to the fore. Lots of old performers do very well, but also the fact that some new performers, so the competition becomes intense. It's not just the same race. It's a race where there are a lot of new runners who are not simply running, they are sprinting. Now, when China rises, that's the last question. Where does India stand amidst these challenges? Where do we stand as a nation state? Where's that pride and glory that we had? How do we rebuild? What are the challenges we face? Now, that's where the story really begins for me. Now, been at the forefront of this, at least the new race for knowledge society. The argument here being that India is a democracy,